I believe that it's time for him to drop out of the race. And when it comes to my own endorsements, I've made 8 endorsements at the state and federal level. They've all been right here in New York City. I'm incredibly excited at the fact that they won their races, and that's where my focus is for now. I think the focus of today should be to respond to the gravity of what so many of us have read, and I think that the only appropriate response is for the campaign to come to an end.
So according to Graham Platner, he must be part of the large force trying to crush Graham Platner and push him out of the race. And it's worth noting that Mayor Mamdani, who shares his top political strategist with Platner, never endorsed Graham Platner's campaign. Graham Platner told this lie about the people who urged him to drop out of the race.
They would rather see Susan Collins win than have me be the next senator from Maine.
That is an obvious lie. That is what he looks like when he is lying to you, just boldly lying to you. Not one Democrat anywhere in Maine or outside of Maine who has called on Graham Platner to leave the race would rather see Susan Collins win. He is lying about that. They wanted him out of the race because they hoped to beat Susan Collins in November, and that Graham Platner would have to leave the race, in their view at this point, in order to do that. But when you are committed to a self-centered, lying version of what is happening here, that is the kind of lie that Graham Platner is willing to throw at people who chose to support him, people who know that's a lie, including United States senators who chose to endorse him and who then called on him to leave the race. Graham Platner said he's not trying to dictate who the next Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine should be.
I'm not trying to dictate to anyone who it should be or how we get there, but I will say this: it needs to be open, transparent, and democratic. It needs to be reflecting the will and the values of the people that built this movement, the people that showed up on June 9th. People in D.C. need to stay in D.C.
That sounds good to me. People in D.C. need to stay in D.C. But Graham Platner sure didn't think that when this guy, Bernie Sanders, came up from D.C. to endorse him. And now every single person, every senator, every House member who made the trip from D.C. to endorse and campaign for Graham Platner in Maine has already called for him to drop out of the race. They did that yesterday. And so we have to wonder, who wrote that line? People in D.C. need to stay in D.C. And one reason to wonder is that Morris Katz flew from New York City today to Maine to help Graham Platner prepare his exit statement tonight. So who wrote that line? And so does Graham Platner think that people in New York should stay in New York? Because he sure didn't think that when he began his campaign at the urgings of that New York City political operative who flew to Maine today to help him.
We are suspending campaign operations. This is incredibly difficult because I know that some will think it's an admission of guilt, and it most certainly is not. We're not doing it because of the allegations. We're doing it because of the structures that are being taken away from us by those in power.
We're not doing it because of the allegations. So he's not dropping out because of anything any woman has ever said about him. He's doing it because of those evil people in power, people like Zohran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, people who have been advocating for the policy positions that Graham Platner took from them to use in his campaign for, in Bernie Sanders' case, decades before Graham Platner was even born.
All we were asking for was health care, was to end a genocide, to use our taxpayer dollars at home to uplift our communities instead of waging war overseas. We were asking for a fair system. We were asking for an end to the corruption, the end to the money in politics. We were asking for real democracy.
Yeah, no one's ever asked for that before. No one's ever campaigned on anything like that before. So that campaign had to be crushed. Bernie Sanders is a senator from Vermont. You could, if you wanted to, walk from Maine to Vermont. Wouldn't take that long, walking across New Hampshire, especially at the northernmost point, and find a senator who's been campaigning on those things for all of Graham Platner's life. But Graham Platner pretended tonight that without him, we never would have heard any of those ideas, all of which were lifted directly from Bernie Sanders and from many other Democratic elected officials all over the country. There wasn't a single original idea in the Platner campaign, not one. Graham Platner, who has been paying attention to politics for all of a year now, decided to lecture the people who have the horrible job now, the horrible duty to clean up after his mess. He decided to lecture our first guest tonight and all of the other people who are going to have to step in now and fix all of this, the mess that Graham Platner created, and do it in a hurry.
Decisions should not be made in back rooms by people in places of political power. Party apparatchiks are not the ones to make these decisions. These decisions need to be made in the open by the people of this state, the people who got us here.